Hi, everyone. So I'm so pleased to be here today with all of you, even though I can only see a few of you. And I think it's just wonderful that we can come together like this in the midst of all that's going on and have a great conversation about parenting and just share some ideas. And I'm going to share a number of thoughts with you today. I'm going to try to pause at some point to take questions. We'll see if that works. If it doesn't, we'll just do it at the end. But I thought it might be nice if you want to ask a question, trying to keep it focused on what I'm talking about, and then we can move on. So I want to start today by first talking briefly about expectations. Expectations are key all the time. Expectations in parenting, expectations in lots of different areas. But what I'm finding is that when your expectations are too high right now, parents are ending up feeling very disappointed, very frustrated, and it's also interfering with their relationship with their kids. So a lot of today is going to be trying to moderate and kind of tweak and look at your expectations during this period. The more reasonable they can be, the better you will feel. So as I'm talking, just think about expectations that you have for yourself and for your family at this time, and whether they're too high sometimes, but also can be too low. And people also don't want to have expectations that are too low at this point. This is clearly a difficult time for all. We're all navigating new waters. We're all trying to figure things out. But the good news about parenting is that there are definitely some basic fundamentals that still remain true. So we do have things that we know are helpful to go by at this time. I think the challenge is just how we tweak them right now. So I'm going to talk about some of these fundamentals first. But I also want to add that I understand and respect that people are also in very different places right now. Some people are dealing with tremendous challenges. Some people have had losses, lots of personal things occurring at this time. And some people are in different locations, someone else's home. So you need to also balance your expectations based on where you are and what's happening in your life. And that's personal and individual. So also keep that in mind as we're talking. Okay, okay, let's first look at what is helpful. Structure and routine is helpful. It provides comfort and security. It allows for predictability, and it reduces decision-making fatigue. I am sure everybody has heard the word structure and routine so many times in these past 6-7 weeks. And I want to kind of define it a bit, because I think at the beginning, the idea that parents should have a routine and structure the day for their kids has become overwhelming for a lot of people. So we know that structure is important. We know it's important for ourselves as adults, and we know it is important for kids. When there is structure, there's predictability. And that's key right now. With everything feeling rather unpredictable, if you can predict basic things in your day, this is going to be very helpful. And I don't mean having an 8-hour routine or schedule for your kids. I mean basic things. So for example, get up in the morning, get your kids dressed if they're young and they need help. If they don't, have your kids get dressed. Don't ease into the day with everyone in their pajamas. This is part of a routine. If you have an older child and you can sit down in the morning and have a cup of coffee or tea with them, put that into your schedule. These things matter. They're not overwhelming, but they help to structure your day. One of the things that I do think is actually key to trying to keep as a pretty routine habit is sleep. So a lot of parents are asking me and saying, well, I can't, continue to do everything. There's no order in my house. How can I keep the rules, and what can I let go of? And there are things that people need to let go of in terms of staying very structured. But one of the things that I feel parents should try to continue to stay on top of is sleep routines for their kids. And obviously, if you have teens and you're listening, it's a little harder to tell your teen when to go to sleep. But particularly for younger kids, keep the evening routines consistent. And this is for several reasons. First, people need sleep during this time. Giving up on sleep and having kids stay up much later than they usually do, which is what I'm hearing is happening a lot, doesn't help their ability to function during the day. So I feel like if there's something you're going to protect your kids' sleep routine. If it's off by a half hour, that's fine. But kids shouldn't be going to sleep 2 hours later. The other reason is that people don't have a lot of privacy right now. And just for the parents' mental state, you need your time in the evening. You need some time to yourself. So this is another reason why I really think that parents need to focus on getting their kids to sleep on time. Okay. Just want to say one word about decision making. Making decisions all day long is difficult. Don't think people always appreciate the amount of fatigue that you can feel when you have to continually make decisions, particularly now when you're making decisions, even if they're small ones, under stress. So in order to reduce decision-making fatigue, having things that you do regularly is very helpful. So you don't have to wake up every day and make a decision. What am I going to do now? What is my child going to do? So see it also from a decision-making fatigue perspective. Okay, rituals. So rituals are helpful. They provide continuity, stability, and they connect you to the past. And our past before COVID isn't so far away in the past. And I think it's important to keep doing things that you've done. And you can even create new rituals now. They might be things as simple as we're going to have a Sunday night dinner every Sunday. We're going to have movie night every Saturday night. But these kind of rituals matter. I think you should continue to celebrate anything that comes up. Don't take the attitude, well, I can't have any reasonable birthday party for my child, so, we're going to kind of bypass it. Do what you can do. So please continue to celebrate. I mean, Mother's Day is coming up. Everybody should have something that they do for this day. And I think that what I'm hearing is that people are really appreciating the simpler things, the smaller birthday parties, the Zoom surprise birthday parties that I've heard people are doing for each other. And these things really matter. So do continue that. Okay, so next I'm going to talk a bit about family collaboration and support. At this point, when people are living together, maybe with a lot of other people, maybe not, but don't have maybe the help or support they've had in the past, caregivers, people that helped clean the home, it is time to have all people chip in. And I've heard a lot of moms that are very overwhelmed. I'm doing laundry, I'm doing this, I'm juggling everything. And my message is your kids need to help out, even very young kids. Now, I understand very young kids help sometimes is a bit of a hindrance, but it's more the idea that they're chipping in. This is a time to really teach your kids about a sense of community and what it means to give back to your family. While they might give you a little tough time when you say it's your turn to do the dishes, that's not a reason not to ask. Most kids are going to give a little pushback with responsibilities and chores, but overall, the feeling of being part of a community and helping out is way, way more important than a little bit of the back talk you might get. So hang in there with this and have everyone realize there is a sense of purpose and responsibility at this time. I also think it's really important to encourage your kids to try to help others in any way that's possible. I understand that's limited, but it can mean just reaching out to people in your family. If there's grandparents that are far away, might be living alone, might be feeling particularly vulnerable right now, you should have your kids doing things to connect with them. It shouldn't just be parents' responsibility. Have them make phone calls, get on FaceTime for a few minutes. Maybe if it's a young child, draw a picture for a grandparent. But think in terms of giving back and helping others, because it really develops a good habit and a good feeling for your kids as well. Okay. So you want to focus, of course, on what is in your control. In moments like this, when we do feel so much is out of our control, there really are many things on a daily basis that are actually in your control. And that's where I want people to think about focusing their energy. So I've recommended to a lot of people, create a calendar for your kids and teens. They could probably do one themselves, but you can do a family calendar. Put everything on the calendar. Put on all activities that are going on in your family, people's birthdays. Have people see that life is continuing and your kids need to see what's going on. So this is something that does create a sense of control. Create social opportunities for your kids if they're not old enough to do that themselves. That includes things like making play dates with friends, connecting to relatives. These connections are very important. I understand a lot of young kids aren't going to be that interested in sitting on a FaceTime play date for that long. But really the purpose is just to even be able to see people that they are no longer seeing for sometimes 1 minute. It's very hard, particularly for younger children in preschool. They don't understand where everyone has gone. So even just having them eyeball friends and family is important. Your expectations should not be that they're going to sit on a play date for 30 minutes. Your expectation should be that it's just a chance to connect. And it's also helpful, particularly with like younger and lower school age kids, to create an activity for them to do together. Structure the play date a bit. It can be very simple. It can be drawing together, reading together, playing some other game. Keep it easy, simple, and structured, and that will be more helpful. Organize some activities for your kids to do this is also in your control. Make a list of things that can be done, and have them participate, have them be involved in doing this. I'm going to get a little more to this later. Okay. Before I talk about what is not helpful, I'm going to pause for a minute for questions.
Okay, Dr. Cooper, if anyone has a question, please use the group chat so that we can make sure we're all seeing it. And I did see a question asking about if you have any tips for getting kids to help. As you mentioned, sometimes there'll be some pushback. Is there any language or any type of recommendation you have to really get your kids to help out?
It's a great question, and it's something that parents struggle with all the time, even in better times. I think several things. Having them be part of what they can do is important. So instead of telling them, you're going to be making your bed, you're going to be doing this, sit with them and say, how can you help out? When a child has some ownership and some say in what they're doing, it changes the atmosphere and it changes the way they view. It's their choice now. It's not just you demanding it. So I think that's one helpful thing. If they're very young, then just give them a choice of two things. Say you can do this right now or this. Make the jobs fun and give them praise for pitching in. As opposed to, it's very easy to get critical. You're not doing this, you're not helping. But when they are, make sure that you emphasize it and just focus on, again, what it means to help out the family. Wow, I can see you're helping out everyone. This is so helpful today. Thank you. You know, things like that. So remember, positive reinforcement. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'm going to continue on then. Okay. So what is not helpful? Overexposure to COVID news is not helpful for kids or teens for that matter. So people need to please be aware of what your kids are seeing and hearing. Most of what kids often learn are through hearing conversations from parents on the TV, seeing images. These things can be very frightening to kids. And a lot of times parents will say, well, the TV's on, but my child's not really paying attention. This is usually not the case, especially when there's imagery. Imagery is very powerful. We all remember 9/11 and the imagery of that time. And there's a lot of very scary imagery on TV right now. So don't think your kids aren't watching if it's on in the room. And even if they look busy, please be very vigilant to this. In my practice, I'm always fascinated to learn what kids hear. Kids learn so much that parents don't want them to learn, by the way, overhearing conversations between parents. Parents often aren't aware that kids are listening or that their voices are louder, especially for those people living in apartments. So just become aware, curtail your conversations around your kids. No one wants to be hearing talk of COVID all the time. It's really taxing. In addition, I mean, for teens, it's different because they're on their own devices. They have access to news. But I think it's important just to have conversations with teens about what they're watching and what they're reading about. And you can even engage, obviously, in some interesting conversations. But I would just help them realize that they might be exposing themselves to too much. And you have to be the judge of that. But it's a conversation definitely worth having, with your teens as well. Okay. Okay. So obviously it's not really helpful to be communicating a lot of anxiety to your children. And this is a tough one right now. A lot of people are feeling a tremendous amount of stress, and it's hard not to have some of that communicated. So here's where expectations really come into play. You do not need to feel as if your children cannot handle being exposed to any stress or tension right now. That is unrealistic and would put a great burden on you. Kids can understand that parents feel worried and concerned about things. And this is actually an opportunity to have parents even teach about, you can be nervous and you can be concerned, but there's also things that you can do to try to problem solve and to show resilience. This is a fantastic opportunity for parents to teach resilience. I mean, when do we ever have this intense amount of time together where these things can be learned? And I think that it's important to always remember your kids are watching what you do more than what you say. So modeling is extremely important. And we can talk to our kids and tell them what's helpful, share values, all of that, which is important. But at the end, kids will be watching you. So your behavior needs to be in line with your values and your resilience and things of this nature, because that is what will come through. So be reasonable, be easy on yourself, but do realize that this is an opportunity to teach very positive things to your kids. The other thing is, you might be having a hard day or a hard hour, and you might say something you didn't mean, or get a little like testy. with your spouse, with your partner, with any of your kids, it's okay to apologize. You know, I think this is also a very important time to show your kids how to come back and kind of make something a little better. Apologizing to kids is always important. And you're modeling that, you know, I'm human. I said some things I shouldn't have, and I'm under stress too, and I wanted to apologize. It's fine. I mean, I think it's actually makes you look human, makes you look caring, and it really respects your child too. And kids love when their parents apologize. The only thing is that if you're apologizing too much, it's no longer helpful, and you kind of need to think about that. So what helps reduce anxiety is self-care. And a lot of people are like, self-care, how can I take care of myself right now? But I think that you can, for sure. That the way self-care looks might be a little different. And so your expectations might have to change. Instead of going to the gym for an hour, you might be able to take a walk for 15 minutes. But things like this you can still do. You just have to kind of rethink what is possible right now. But there's lots of things that don't take a lot of time that just contribute to your self-care, like sleeping well, eating healthfully. There's a lot of good meditation apps. And a lot of people have said to me, oh, well, you know, I never thought that was my thing. But now they found that these apps are helpful, and meditation and mindfulness is helpful. So it's interesting to see, and I've seen this with a lot of my patients, that people are also really rethinking things that they might not think would have worked for them in the past. So this is part of being adaptable and open-minded. Headspace is a good app. Calm is another one. For kids, there's one called Stop, Breathe, and Think, which I really like. So just a few thoughts, and I'm sure people have their own other ways of engaging in self-care. Another just quick mention about overloading yourself with news. Parents do the same thing. Many of the people I work with reduce anxiety by researching and learning. And this is a very common way to feel in control and to feel like you understand what's going on. What I'm seeing is that it's not really working well now. And people are ending up feeling overwhelmed and flooded by the amount of information that is out there. So this is something that I've asked a lot of people to kind of rethink, because what normally was helpful, like learning as much as you could, is not really that helpful right now for many people. Anxiety is rampant, and it's very easy to absorb other people's anxiety and worries and fears. So I think it's also important to set some limits with maybe people in your life who can rev you up, and, you know, say, this is a day that I'm not worrying today. Let's talk about something else. Because this is one of the ways that anxiety and stress basically gets communicated and transferred from person to person. So watch for that too, because it is important to protect yourself when you know that there are certain people who will really ramp up your anxiety. Okay, this is one of my favorites. Parents often want to entertain and keep their kids busy. We live in a world where our kids are constantly entertained. And in many ways, I think this is a great moment to kind of pause on that and have kids start to learn how to be more self-directed and take on a little more responsibility for engaging in play alone, for figuring out things that will make them happy, as opposed to kind of the way life has moved. Kids are in classes all the time. They're entertained at parties. There is just an overload of entertainment for our kids. So allow your kids to feel bored. It is okay. Boredom is inevitable. it's going to happen for everybody. And it really motivates people to be creative, particularly kids. So if your kids are coming to you on board, it's not a sign that you're not doing a good job or that you have to like run into mommy guilt mode and come up with 10 activities. It's really a moment for them to become a little more resilient and inner directed and create some play opportunities. Kids, some parents have said to me they feel guilty that their kids are playing alone a lot, or maybe if they have a sibling with a sibling. That is the most wonderful thing you can see. If your kids can figure out how to play alone and create a world for themselves of entertainment and fun, you can just step back and enjoy it. So no reason to feel guilty for kids who are playing on their own. And also appreciate that a lot of creative play for younger kids is also a way of expressing themselves, and it's a way of dealing with stress and anxiety. So you could walk in a room and see, your young child talking out loud about, oh no, you have to wash your hands, or things like this. And this is their language. This is their emotional language, is play. So that's actually very helpful for them. There's so much that goes into planning play, executing it, figuring it out. There are so many cognitive abilities that are strengthened that I always like parents to appreciate that, because sometimes it feels like their kids aren't doing anything, they're just playing. But there is a lot that's happening intellectually during play. Okay. So I want to start and move towards how to talk to your kids. I mean, I know many people at this point, I think week 6 or 7, have spoken to their kids about COVID, and it's a conversation, but I'm just going to provide some general ideas as well. Okay, so you want to provide developmentally appropriate explanations for things that are going on. So for very young children, what this translates to is they don't understand, and I'm talking more about like preschool age, they don't understand the enormity of what's happening. But what they do understand is that there has been change. And many of the kids, especially 3 and 4-year-olds, will notice this. So things have changed in their routines. You might be living in a different location, which is different for your kids. If you're in a brand new home, a home that is not a weekend home or something of that nature, it takes kids a while to adjust, and it takes adults a while to adjust too. I've had a lot of people that are in homes that they've never been in, and there is an adjustment period. So understand that. Young kids also notice that they're not seeing the people that they usually see, and that is very stressful and confusing to them. So it's hard to maybe, you're going to explain in very simple ways, but just to understand the framework that even 3 and 4-year-olds and 2-year-olds do notice these changes. So in any of the conversations that you're having, whether they're ongoing or whether they're new, it's important to try to use language that your kids understand. So for very young kids, you're going to say things like lots of people have sniffles and coughs. So we're going to play at home for a while until people feel better. Most young kids understand a cold. They don't need to understand what COVID is, but they'll understand things that have already been in their lives and they've been exposed to. When you're having these conversations, it's really, really important to listen to your kids and encourage conversations. So the first thing you're going to do is to just listen to what they have to say before you intervene and speak. Encourage questions. And the reason to encourage questions is because you don't always know what their fears are or what they're worried about. So by encouraging questions, you will have a better idea, and you are then guided by the information that your child gives. And you shouldn't assume the information. So, some kids aren't going to say much, but some kids will. And so it's important just to listen at first. Next thing you want to do is empathize, particularly with teens. And teens have had, I mean, all people, but teens have had tremendous losses. There's been losses around graduation. There's been losses around school plays, prom. I mean, the list can go on. And it's super important for you to just empathize, not even give alternatives. Oh, maybe they'll do something later for graduation. Just empathize and let them understand that you get it. That's really your goal. Many parents at times in trying to help kids or teens balance some of these losses will say things like, well, yeah, but it's okay because some people have it worse and some people have lost people. That's all true. And that perspective can be shared later, but not right away, because everybody needs to feel their losses right now, and adults as well. There have been significant things people miss and they're sad about. And it's important to just experience that, and then you will move on from it. But if you push it off as, well, everyone else has it worse, or this could be happening or that, it's hard to process those. And you don't want to cut your kids' feelings off. So after you've empathized, there's going to be a lot of empathizing going on. You're going to provide some honest reassurance. And that's when you can talk about things like what ways that you're staying safe, ways that the COVID epidemic is being dealt with, things to reassure them to reduce anxiety, and then again, of course, things that you can do to reduce chances of getting sick, because a lot of kids are worried about this and they are worried about things happening to their parents. So reassurance is also important. If there comes a time and a period, also it's important to emphasize for everybody, the helpers. Kids should always be reminded of the helpers during scary, difficult times. So when you're talking about ways to reassure, you're going to talk about all the people that are helping out right now, people in the health field, etc. So always focus on helpers. There's lots of questions that kids have because they come up with amazing questions, and teens, that you can't answer. And parents often feel guilty, inadequate sometimes, because they want so desperately to ease their child's worries. But it's really important to realize that it's okay not to answer questions if you don't have proper answers. And it's okay to say to your child, that's just a great question, but I don't have the answer. And that's the best you can do. But you want to encourage them to come to you. And so you can say, I'm so glad you're thinking about all these things. And they're great questions. So you always can come to me to ask questions or share your worries, even if I don't always have the answers. I'm here to listen to you. And that's a way of dealing with the kind of frustration we feel for not being able to provide answers to our kids right now. Sitting with your child's pain is a very difficult thing, but all parents, even in, let's call them regular times, have to learn to just sit with their child's concerns, pains, without being able to always make it feel better. And I feel like with all that's going on right now, that is just being highlighted in tremendous ways. And it's hard for parents. It brings up a lot of vulnerable and upsetting feelings when you can't kind of make it better for your kids. Okay. I'm going to just really quickly go through this because I'm seeing the time is going over. So just very quickly, some common responses to stress. You can see this list. Most of you have probably seen some of these behaviors going on. What matters in terms of red flags and concerns is the intensity of these behaviors, the duration of them, and how much they're interfering with daily living and functioning. So if you're seeing that the duration is on, off sometimes, you're having some somatic complaints, not all the time, this is not these are not unusual responses to stress. We get more concerned when they don't end. Even during this time, people should be settling in to what's going on to some extent. You'll get a lot of regression. Probably the most common thing on this list. Kids starting to act in more immature ways. If you've got young kids, they might revert back to sucking their thumb. They might be bedwetting, things of this nature. Older kids will just tend to look much more needy. You're going to get a lot more clinging behavior, kids wanting more attention, kids having, and older people, teens as well, having trouble separating or wanting to push you away a lot. You're going to get some interesting issues around attachment, wanting to be close to you and then getting angry at you. This is all part of what we expect to see. If you have kids that are more anxious all the time, you're going to get a lot of them wanting reassurance, maybe following you around the house, asking endless questions. These are signs of anxiety. You don't want to overindulge it. You want to help your kids to contain themselves too. You answer questions and then you distract and move on to something else, because too much conversation can also contribute to anxiety. Parents do that with the best of intentions, but realize sometimes it's helpful just to help your child to contain themselves and move them on. And just finally, you're going to get acting out. That acting out behavior is just going to be typical. And that looks like pushing limits, testing a lot of the rules that you're putting down. You might see some defiance, particularly in teens. If you're making suggestions, you'll get the no, that's dumb, that's this, that's that. And then you might, by the way, see them do it later, because that's a typical pattern for teens. When you suggest it, it's no good. But then later, when they can own it, it's okay. Just going to move quickly. I mean, just a word about online schooling. We could spend the whole time talking about this. Set reasonable expectations. This is tough. Online schooling is tough. Schools had to jump into gear in no time at all. They've spent huge amounts of time on trying to develop curriculum. So try to be patient, and try not to also judge your kids too much on whether they're able to stay focused. I'm hearing a lot of parents say things and really get concerned about their kids because they can't focus. And even like asking questions about, like, could this be ADHD, things like this. I would not take this opportunity to judge your child if it's difficult for them to sit on a screen. Kids will be able to do this to a varying degree. Lots of kids need other stimulation in a room in order to focus. And it's like kind of having school with the tough part and none of the good part. So, the good part meaning community, socializing, friends joking around with each other, like that's been put aside. And now it's just the focusing on a screen to learn. So, be reasonable but also expect something from your kids. It's not a time to just throw up your hands and say, this is too much, because that's not helpful. And that will inevitably affect your kids' self-esteem. So I'm going to finish now because I really want to have a chance to take some questions, and I realize it's getting really late.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Cooper. That was great. I will remind everyone, if you have a question, please use the group chat and we will manage questions that way. And I'm going to start with the first question that we had come in. And if this is your question and you want to unmute yourself and jump in, but I'll just read it for you here. It's asking, what's the best way to explain to a child why he or she is not going to school during COVID-19 if he or she keeps asking the same question to the parents, especially if it's an overachiever child who wants to return to school? and it's kindergarten through 5th grade level.
Kindergarten through 5th grade. Okay. Well, first off, I actually think kids asking the same question over again at times can be a healthy sign. If it's extremely repetitive, it can also be a sign of anxiety. But questions are a way of trying to figure things out. And I think instead of trying to answer it, because there really is not an answer that you can give that you know is true at this point, it's better to try to just get at what's hard and sad and frustrating, and say things like, I know you must miss school so much, and I know how hard you like to work, and go with empathy, because underneath these questions is fear, is sadness, is frustration. And so if you can try to attach to the feeling that your child's having, it might help them to move on. You can also give concrete responses, like right now, and talk about the need to stay home and why this is important. For a 4th grader, this is something they can understand. They might not like it, but they can understand. A kindergartner, it's a little trickier. So I would provide, some concrete information as well. But don't underestimate that they're also just really sharing feelings with you and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
also remind them of things that you can do at home. If the person's a perfectionist, we can still learn.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to move on to I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you. This is helpful. Thanks for that. And I'll move on to the next question we had, which is asking, what are some key points to look out for in a child if he or she shows no anxiety or depression during COVID-19, but more than likely there is?
So that's an interesting question. And there are parents who I've spoken to who are kind of like, my child is not reacting at all. Is that a problem? They seem fine. And, it's hard. Like, we don't want to pathologize when we don't see things going on, but it sounds like this person thinks that there is more underlying it. I think, again, you're going to look for some of the signs and some of those red flags that I mentioned. If you're not seeing them, you can't push them. But there's different ways that anxiety and even depression come through in kids. And, this is just something to kind of widen your view on looking for. Is that person on?
Yes.
Because I don't know if they want to be a little more specific about what they're concerned about not hearing.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to just add, is this person a teen?
I'm not seeing that.
I didn't, if I can talk.
Yes.
I didn't submit that question, but it's exactly how my teen is. So it's a fantastic question. I could have written it. For me, I have a 14-year-old boy, and he's acting like he's cool as a cucumber.
Yeah. So I do want to add that, and I understand, because people want to see some reaction because it seems human, but I do want to add, and I'm not suggesting this is true for your son or for the other person who brought in the question. I mean, I see a lot of teens, and there are teens that for some of them, there are losses for sure, but this also feels like a bit of a break, particularly socially. And, we can talk for a long time about the social pressure on teens, the feeling FOMO of being left out, seeing people on Instagram, seeing all of that. And I've had a number of my teens say that they feel it's been a really nice break for them, not to have to feel like they're missing out, not to have to feel some of the social pressures that they felt. Again, this is just perspective of some teens. Now, on the other hand, there's the flip side, and also a lot of teens feel mixed, that they miss their friends. Teen years is a time where kids are connecting to friends more than family. And so this support group has been cut off in a way that's fairly drastic, although thank goodness, finally, for computers and electronics, because it really does help people to stay connected. But what I'm also seeing now a bit with teens and younger people is that at first everybody was jumping on with their friends in chat rooms and all sorts of things. And now they're starting to fatigue on that a bit. So, important to talk about to your teens, like, are you still in touch with friends? Because it's getting more draining for some, and they're doing it less.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Cooper. And Brenda, did you have a follow-up question, or did
No, actually, you answered the question that I did submit, because I kind of noticed, like, there were nights when school was on in March where I had to say, like, stop chatting with your friends, like, get off the phone, like, where are their parents? Why are you guys still on the phone at like 11 o'clock at night? But now it has dissipated, so you address that. So thank you.
Yeah. I feel like it's important for all of us to remember that people need to pace themselves through this. I think when we all started to get our head around what was happening, a lot of people kind of ran out like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to clean my closet. I'm going to stay in touch. I'm going to have Zoom cocktail parties. And people are starting to get fatigued. So, I think it's better to conceptualize what's going on at longer term in a way, even, God willing, it's not long term, but just in terms of mental pacing. Because there's a lot of burnout during this. And I think that needs to be considered. And I see some of that burnout with teens and socializing. They should continue to socialize, but, maybe just it should be paced a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I'm going to read the next question that we have. And if this person wants to unmute themselves and jump in, but I'll just read it for you, Dr. Cooper. Mm-hmm. It's, our teenage daughter completely blew us away by engaging in very risky and dangerous behavior, both for herself and us. We're not sure how much that's from being cooped up at home and how much is it from making bad judgments and decisions. How should we react to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tough when you're a teen and you're kind of grappling with your own needs. And as we know, teens have a lot of needs, and some of them are self-absorbed and selfish in a normal way, in a developmental way, and some of the reality of what's going on. Coupled with the idea that teens do feel omnipotent, their level of risk is often different. So I think, there's two minds of a teen. And I do believe that there is a reasonable side that does reason, wants to take care of themselves, other people. And then there's the immature side that's like, I'm going to do my thing and nothing's going to happen to me. And I think for that person, in speaking to your teen, make sure you're addressing the rational side and not the immature side. So that would look like approaching them with, conversation rather than threats and rather than criticism, and engaging that side that I believe every teen has. I don't think teens are totally irresponsible or spontaneous all the time, and really tapping into the side of them that is responsible. And you can do that by really asking them what they think the right thing to do is, not blaming. Look, you have to set limits now, and it's hard sometimes if your teen is not used to listening to you. So, everyone comes in with a history of relationship with their teens or even young adults that might be home now. But I think it is time just to have a conversation, help them realize what it means to behave recklessly right now, and that it just has very different fundamental ramifications and consequences. Does that person want to respond? They're on?
Yeah, I'll check the chat, or if that person would like to unmute themselves and follow up, we can do that as well. And
yeah, I think it's a difficult balance to have, and I don't know how much, as we're trying to grapple with, how much is from this and how much is just being a teen and making poor choices. So that's kind of what we were struggling with.
Yeah, it is difficult, but I think, again, like engaging in conversation that doesn't feel blame and punitive is going to be much more helpful. And asking them to come up with ideas about the way your behavior should look. You might disagree, but you need to have a dialogue about it.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And I see we had a raised hand. I'm not sure if that's for a question. You want to unmute your line and ask? Or I'll monitor the chat. I'll just open this up for if anyone else has a question now. You can use the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, yep, there you go.
Can you hear me? Hi, thank you so much for answering my questions. Just to piggyback on the question this person asked, related to in the past we've experienced something similar to, but I think that also this is a good time to connect with grandparents, if they have grandparents, if they have someone close by like a cousin, someone that they know they also make good judgments so that they can help them and they can kind of see like, and also maybe that sometimes children tend to listen to others, unfortunately, but find someone in the family that that they're are helpful during this time too, and maybe that child will express what's really going on, and it might be something not as as we think, the reason they're acting up. But it's just also there, like you had said too, Doctor, is sometimes they just are reacting a little bit differently because they've been cooped up at home for a long time,
Yeah.
So sometimes I know working as an educator, kids just want to kind of go a little bit above and beyond, of what the rules are in the house and not pay attention to the parents. But sometimes it's something very small. So just kind of reassure that sometimes it's just good to start having that, hey, do you want a little bit of time, chat, talk with your grandpa, talk with whoever, they have that trust. So it's not always mom and dad there at the house.
I think, it's funny when you said, you made a comment about bringing other people in that like, alluding to like, that's not always like, it's too bad that you have to bring other people in. I think it's the greatest thing that we can do as parents is to bring other people in to communicate to our kids and to teach our kids. It takes a lot of the pressure off some of the dynamic that goes on between parents and children that is just so embedded, and often very typical and developmentally appropriate. But it is hard at times for particularly teens to listen to their parents. So even in regular times, I'm always advocating for bring in a teacher. Let the teacher talk to your child. Let other professionals, because they can listen differently. And that it's a very important resource. It's a little more limited right now, of course, but you could even have your teen speak to your pediatrician. And if you have a relationship with that person, tell them what's going on, and maybe hearing it from a pediatrician or a medical professional will help them to understand at least on the surface what their behavior needs to look like. So I agree with you. And appreciate that suggestion.
And just last, the reason I thought about that too is that growing up, I know my parents were always working, and they worked in the field, so they had really crazy hours. So my grandpa came into play. I didn't have any of my grandmas at the time; they weren't alive. But my grandpa, he would take me to the park along with other of his grandchildren. So we had that time, and that was a connection. He would go buy us some little chips or whatever. And I know that's not possible now, but we can very still much get creative through the internet, things that they like, and, show, and the grandparents, they know in the goodness in their heart what they can do for their grandchildren. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Those look like the questions that we have for now, but if anyone still has a question, you can use the chat box, or you can feel free to unmute yourself. We'll give it another couple of seconds here. And if we don't have any more come in, I want to thank everyone for joining us today.
I want to add one more, like, just because it just
Sure.
with this last woman was talking about. If you're living at home with a spouse or a partner, it's also really important to think about being on the same page with some of these issues and things that are going on. You might not be on the same page 100%, but what's going to be most helpful for your kids is in creating a sense of safety, is that they see that you're cooperating and working together. It's important all the time, but I feel like it's highlighted now. So just keep that in mind. And, you know, in terms of reassurance, seeing parents work together creates a tremendous sense of security for your kids of all ages, teens as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And Dr. Cooper, I'm seeing in the chat messages thanking you. This was a really great presentation. Learned a lot, very helpful. So I want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Dr. Cooper's contact information is here. We'll be sending this out as well. Thanks so much, Dr. Cooper.
Stay well, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.